Welcome to the Kara's Cure Show, where we explore the cutting edge of wellness. I'm Kara Sundlin. What's the one thing our kids really need to handle life? Resiliency. We explore the cutting edge of wellness here, and resiliency is something key to all of that. But as parents, I know I do, we worry about things that we're doing that could mess up our kids down the road. And if you're listening to this, I think our guests would want you to know you're already a good enough parent, like all of us, trying to do our best. So today I'm excited to speak with Dr. Laura Saunders. She is a child psychologist at the Institute of Living in Hartford with some tips for us. Thank you, doctor, for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Kara.
I mean, parents do worry, right? We'll joke, but also worry about, oh, what am I going to do that my kids are going to talk about in therapy someday? We worry about mistakes we're going to make.
Right, and we all make mistakes. And I think that's what's really important to keep in mind. Parenting's the hardest job in the world. We all make mistakes, and it's about making minor self-corrections to help you go down a different path. Being a good parent is about being self-reflective. How could I have handled that differently? How will I handle it differently next time? It's not about perfection. We all make mistakes, but we want to try to provide some guidance to avoid certain mistakes over others, or to use some self-correction to help your children go down a different path.
Yeah. So that's why we're here talking about there are some parenting mistakes that we often make that really can impact a child's mental strength. So you're going to give us 5 steps that we can foster resiliency. And number 1, we need to do, I'm going to put it up to you.
Stop saving our children from failure experiences. Here's the reality. As adults, we have a lot of life experience, right? You have a lot of life experience. I have a lot of life experience. Most all parents out there have a lot of life experience. And we'd really like to save our children from some of the heartaches, some of the painful things that we experience. But if you think about it, those painful things stick with us because we hopefully learn from them. And so what we don't want to do is prevent our children from having some failure experiences. As I always say, I don't mean like safety issues, right? You see your child, riding off the edge of a cliff. That's a safety issue. That's different. That's not a failure experience. But things that we can easily fix for them, it could be something as simple as working on a puzzle and you see them just struggling with trying to get some and saying, I know that this piece goes here. Let them struggle, right? And again, it's the smaller struggles. That's where the learning and the problem solving takes place. So it's such a big part of success for any of us is reflecting on and learning from those failure experiences. And that's how we develop some resiliency.
Right. So we have to kind of step back and, just allow them to struggle, which I think is really hard to do. I'm reminded of a story of the founder of Spanx, who said that she thinks she could create Spanx after getting hundreds, maybe thousands of rejection letters about this little garment that now so many people wear. But that her parents used to ask her one question at dinner. All the kids, they'd say, what did you fail at today? And that they just like really wanted to normalize failure. So what should we do to kind of check ourselves when we're like, oh, maybe it's a friendship issue. You see them getting left out of a party, or they're struggling and you're like, I just want to call that mom, or I want to do, there's so many things that we think, oh, we could be there in a way that no one was there for us. But how do we check ourselves so we're not taking them away from those failure experiences?
I mean, a lot of this is fine line stuff. And again, we're not talking about like serious issues around like your child's being bullied and you're just going to let them experience it, or safety issues. They're doing things, they're getting involved in things that are unsafe and could impact them, in a serious way, what we call an adverse childhood event. We're not talking about those kind of things. We're talking about the little things where, sometimes honestly struggling with a peer relationship, while painful to watch, right? No one wants their children to be rejected or to, to not have things work out with a friend. Like, those are hard things to watch. And I like to acknowledge that for parents. It's hard, but letting them sort some of this out themselves and not getting involved at the parent level, not always calling up that other parent and saying, your child said something mean to my child. That might have been true. And you can problem solve with your child around, okay, if someone says something mean to you, what do you need to do to help yourself? You need to walk away, you need to say something back, whatever it is. But letting some of those failure experiences, having them, try things that are difficult. But if you think about it, it's the failure experiences for all of us that really can lead to the biggest learning and the best emotional resiliency.
Yeah, yeah. Number two, expecting perfection. You say parents often, this is a mistake we can make, that it's okay to set some goals, but when we expect perfection, we could be setting our kids up for some troubles down the road.
We all want our children to be their best selves. It is also about knowing, especially when you have multiple children, knowing that this child A does really well in this area, child B does really well in this different area, and it's okay that they're different. At the same time, not always setting the bar so high for them that they constantly feel like they're missing the bar, because that gap creates feelings of inadequacy. It's also about tapping into, your child's inner motivation. While you may want them to be, a straight A student, your child may not care a lot about academics. Now, I want young people to get exposure to all different subjects and to put effort in. You might not think that you're going to use chemistry or algebra later in life, but those problem solving skills are actually foundational blocks for other learning. Mm-hmm. At the same time, expecting your child to get an A in a subject area that's just really not for them means that you are pushing them, and it builds up resentment, and it builds up feelings of confidence issues later in life. So it's really being careful that you are tapping into your child's motivation and what's important to them. Setting goals. I set goals all the time. I constantly have goals. So it's not about not setting goals. It's about setting realistic goals and not always striving for perfection.
Okay, so let's take academics, because this is a big thing where lots of parents do different things, and it's really easy as a parent to go, oh my gosh, there's so much pressure now. Like, they're not going to get into college, and they have to do this, and they have to do that, and they have to do this, and that's a whole other conversation. I know you've helped us take a breath with that. They're going to go to college. They're going to be okay. But is it wrong? Like, is it too? Let's say you have a kid who really, struggles with organization. Maybe your child has ADHD. Maybe they're just not the straight A student, that so-and-so down the street is. Then do you say, you obviously want to set some expectations, right? Do you say, we expect you to get all A's and B's? That seems like something you're able to do. We expect you to have no missing work. Like, how do you set expectations so that they're not just goofing off, but not put so much pressure?
Right. So what you're talking about there is actually setting expectations for effort. Okay. That's different than production. So yes, do you need to, put effort in, spend some time on your homework, get yourself ready? Yes, you need to set expectations for effort. And, in general, when you put in a good amount of effort, there will be some production. But knowing your children and knowing some kids do well in this area, some kids do well in this area, what I don't want us to do is engage in a lot of social comparison, because that really is a huge trap for ourselves as parents and for our children. Thinking about, Sally down the street takes all AP classes or, high level college classes in high school, and my child doesn't want to take any AP classes and doesn't want to do any of those things, right? When you engage in that social comparison, all you serve to do is make yourself feel inadequate as a parent and send messages of inadequacy to your child or to your teen. Mm-hmm. So it's focusing on what your child's strengths and weaknesses, deficits are, And highlighting what their strengths are doesn't mean we don't try to build up some of their weaknesses, but not engaging in a lot of social comparison, because that just sets people up for failure.
So back to what you were saying about effort versus results. You might not make the expectations then, I want you to get all A's and B's. The expectation would be, you're not going out until all of your homework is done. And you know, we want you to make sure you're doing your homework all the time.
Yeah, and if your child's struggling, right? If there's some academic issues, if we're talking about school here, but I've really seen this from parents in sports also. So
yes,
I don't want
to,
like, there are parents that they want their child to be at the highest possible level of sports, and so they've got to be out back throwing pitches, or with their lacrosse stick against the net. There are parents that really insist on many hours of extra practice in sports. And again, if your child's not that into it, what you are doing is creating resentment and feelings of anger and frustration that are just not going to lead to anywhere positive. So it's just keeping in mind what your child's strengths and weaknesses are, having realistic expectations, again, setting some goals, right? If your child says, I really want to be a better lacrosse player, then fine. My suggestion would be, or you can talk to your coach, spending time out back, throwing the lacrosse ball against a net, or, with a friend. You can do things, you can set goals, you can put in extra effort. But even if you put in extra effort, doesn't mean you're going to be the best. And so having expectations for the effort, not necessarily always the end goal.
Yeah. And I love what you said about sports, and I'll just throw a little, my experience. I happen to be related, and I don't have any of those talents. My brother is an Olympic running coach, was actually the manager of the men's track and field team at the Olympics and all of that stuff. And he has said, as he coaches athletes at the highest levels, all the parents who are making them do crazy things, like, you don't really even know until they're older, like until they've gone through puberty, until they're this, and then they have to have the desire. There's a reason I never go to run any of his popular races. I said, I don't have a desire to run the marathon, so I will come and cheer you on. But I guess what you're saying is, if the kids don't have the desire, no amount of banging them over the head is going to make them perfect.
And it might be that kids want to do things to please their parents. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just keeping your expectations in check and really making sure that you tap into your child's motivation, because if you're pushing them too hard in an area where they don't really feel that, they're not motivated, it's just going to create problems down the line.
Okay. So following, I guess what you're saying is, when we set those goals, not only do we want them to be realistic, we want to ask the kids what their goals are.
Engage their cooperation in setting those goals.
Okay, so number 3 of these 5 points we're doing to not to avoid have these parenting mistakes that are so common, making sure that our kids are always comfortable or overindulging them. And that's something that is unique in this parenting generation. We look on Instagram and everyone's got the most perfect lunches and the most perfect rooms and the most perfect this. So there's a lot of, so you're actually saying it's okay. We want our kids to maybe feel some discomfort.
Yes. And having them try new things that's a little bit uncomfortable, right? This is the time where some kids are going to sleepaway camps and doing things that they might not have done before. And that's going to be uncomfortable. That's going to be, you're going to miss them. They're going to really miss you. But you're going to try this experience that they said they wanted to try it, but now it's getting a little closer. Now it's becoming a little bit more uncomfortable. I don't think I want to go. We said we were going to try this, so you're going to try this. And so it's, having them try new things, new friends, new situations. It's a little bit like failure experiences in terms of embracing uncomfortable moments. And again, the corollary to, making sure they don't always feel so comfortable is not overindulging, right? Your child, and I worry that's how this generation of parents are different, is because everything's on social media, right? You see that, that the child down the street has the latest whatever. I mean, clothes, sports items, video games, and just making sure that you're not overindulging, that it feels like there's some effort put in to earn things, so that you equate effort with results.
Okay.
So it's okay to be a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah. And then, so how does the script go like that? Like, so if you're parenting, what would you advise parents when they're like, because we get in that way, like, oh gosh, well, mom, so-and-so, is getting a car when they turn 16, or so-and-so got the latest lacrosse stick. I don't want this, one from Play It Again Sports. They got it at da-da-da. They're always showing you what their friends have. And there's a moment where as a parent, you're going, okay, I'm not good enough. I should be doing this, that, or the other. So what's the scripting for the parent of like, let's take a moment and decide whether or not you really want to do this or not?
I think there's several different factors to consider. Number one is always economics, right?
Yeah.
Not overextending yourself if you truly can't afford something. Number two is really looking at your child, that your child's matching, their motivation and their words, right? Their words and their behavior match. They could say, I want this, and then they could say, I want this. You've seen the patterns and that they want new things, and then they sort of toss them aside. So it's really looking that their words and their behaviors are matching. And again, remember, your children are practicing or engaging in social comparison also. They feel like every other child has something that they don't. And that would always be true. Another child will have something that they don't have. So if we're always looking at what someone else has and what we don't have, that's going to be a very hard existence, because you're going to constantly feel like you don't have enough and that you're inadequate in some way. So what I try to engage in some of those situations is delay of gratification. Okay, you want a new lacrosse stick? This is what I need from you. I need for you to do X. Well, I need you to make your bed every day for 2 weeks. I need you to take the garbage out, whatever. Come up with something where there's a little bit of delay of gratification and some effort to be put in on their part, so that they don't like the next day say, oh yeah, I really didn't want that anyway. So delay of gratification is a lifelong skill that is useful for everyone.
Yeah, well, parents too, right? Done another segment about not buying too much online with your thumb, right? They said leave it in the cart, go to sleep for a day. Right. You still want that thing the next day. So
wait at least 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah,
unless it's a need.
Yeah. So need versus a want. The next thing is not setting parent-child boundaries. And this gets tricky too, because your kids will tell you, well, so-and-so, they're like best friends, and so-and-so's parents are so cool, and when people go over their house, they're allowed to do whatever they want. But you're actually saying, from a psychological perspective, we can't just be a friend.
It's a beautiful thing when, parents and adult children have, made changes to their relationship and, share a lot more with each other. That's a beautiful thing. It's not always achievable, but it's a beautiful thing. What we're talking about here are children and teens that need some expectations, that they need limits, that they need boundaries, that they need structure, that they need things. Really, the worst thing you can do for your child is tell them all your problems, right? Because that's just a burden. And it's one thing to say, we can't afford that, right? We're not going to do that right now. We can't afford that. That's probably a statement of truth in a lot of different situations. It's another thing to say, let me just tell you about all my financial woes, right? To a young person who has zero control over any of that. So that's that boundary. There's things that you can share. We're not doing that right now. We can't go on a vacation this year. Finances are tight. Okay, that's probably a true statement, but that's very different than giving them all the details and using your child as a sounding board in those situations. I do worry a lot about single parents, because they, my hope is that they can build networks of other parents to share things with, because you don't necessarily want to be sharing a lot of things with your children. But, trying the best you can to provide structure and some consistency and having those boundaries.
Yeah, and from a psychological perspective, that structure, you mentioned earlier ACEs, I guess, is that an adverse childhood experience?
Adverse childhood events.
adverse child events. And so there's all this.
Yeah, there's like a
stuff.
huge body of research on adverse child events. So
Yeah,
we
and how
don't need to
many
go
you've
into-
had and how it leads to trauma later, big T, little t. But basically what you're saying is that when it comes to this, when sharing all these things, like we can be hurting our kids when we're trying to, like, especially, and I know that I grew up with a single mom and probably leaned on me a little too much, but we don't want to parentify our kids.
We want to really try not to. And I understand that it's, there's lots of parents out there, even, single parents, grandparents who are raising children, even sometimes, two-parent families where one parent's really doing a majority of the work and the other parent's a little more distant or absent. It's hard. It's really hard. And sometimes you just want to tell your child why you had such a hard day. And I'm not saying you can't say, I had a hard day today. I had X and Y happen, but then I figured it out and then I came up with this solution, right? You want to model a little bit of problem solving there, but not just being careful about using your child as your sounding board, or, the term you use, kind of overly parentifying them, bringing, I think from a systemic point of view, like bringing your child up to your level, as opposed to the parents here and the child's here. It's hard. I'm not criticizing people. I'm just encouraging people not to make the mistake of not having boundaries with your child, with your teen, and, setting some limits when needed and creating some structure for them and some expectations.
Yeah, no, all very reasonable. Number 5, not taking care of yourself. So we get very busy, especially, you get a little older and you've got kids and you've got a job and you've got maybe older parents you're taking care of. So we can really burn out. That's a big topic that we talk here on CURES about. But not taking care of ourselves is actually something that is a parenting mistake, right?
What our children see, what our children and our teens see, because remember, we are role models. So what they see is that if we don't take care of ourselves, right? If you have a lot of bad habits as a parent, you smoke and you maybe drink too much and you don't exercise, you don't eat healthy, you don't do anything to take care of yourself. That's what, and maybe as a parent, you're putting aside all your own needs to take care of your child. But really what you're modeling is, I'm not important, right? And then your child grows up and takes on that same mentality, is I'm not important. I'm going to just meet other people's needs. Right, we call that codependency, but that's a discussion for another time. So doing things, and again, I don't like the word selfish. I don't really use that word. It's a very judgmental word, but doing things that are around self-care and having some self-focus at times. Parents need downtime at night. The kids are in bed, the kids are settled. They need their downtime to rejuvenate themselves. Parents, I really want parents to have friends, to do something outside the home, to do something with your spouse, to go on a date night, to, set aside a half hour at the end of your day to sip a cup of tea and read a book for a little bit, or listen to a podcast, listen to CURES, to do things to rejuvenate yourself and not just put aside all your own needs to meet the needs of your children, because that's what you're modeling, is that other people's needs are more important than your own.
Yeah. And this is something I know, especially moms, if you're on the Channel 3 Mom Squad, and we have a great Facebook group where we're trying to create a community. But this is something, that moms especially struggle with. I asked, does a mom ever get a sick day? And everyone, went crazy. No, of course not. But that's really, it's just serving our kids. I love what you said, that we're modeling for them. A lot of working moms might have guilt that they're missing certain things. And I remember one of the things that I learned in one interview was, but you're also modeling for your kids that you can go out and chase your dreams. You can go out and have a career. You can go out and do things that are important to you. So when we actually take care of ourselves, we are being a good parent. We're teaching our kids something.
Right. And because we are role models, and that is extra pressure on us. And again, I'm not saying, we go off and spend weeks at a time doing our own thing and neglect our children, but taking little bits of time. It would be beautiful if it was every day, but at least intermittently, to do things, that feel good, to go on a walk, to have coffee or tea with a friend, or talk on the phone with a friend, or, join a book club, be outside, do things that make you feel good about yourself, as a way to model that taking care of yourself is really important no matter what age. And yeah, I mean, people's lives are frenetic and difficult, and there's a lot of pressure, and you're juggling so many different things at one time. But taking a little bit of time, I'm not talking hours a day, I'm talking sometimes just 15, 20 minutes to do something for yourself. You are modeling that self-care is just as important as caring for others.
Yeah, and then you can maybe use that delayed gratification. I know you want to go out and play outside, or I know you want to ride to the mall, or whatever stage your kids are at. Mommy needs to take 20 minutes to go whatever we're going to do, decompress. I'll do it in a few minutes. So I guess we're teaching multiple skills, but I want to review at the end of this. If you're remembering all the, I know we all worry about, oh my gosh, what am I doing to mess up our kids? Which we shouldn't, because we're all doing good jobs. But number one, these are the 5 things. Save your children from failure experiences. We don't want to do that. We don't want to expect perfection. Number 2, making sure they're always feeling comfortable. We don't want to be doing that. Not setting parent-child boundaries, and not taking care of yourself. Those 5 things, which you've given us some really, easy, doable things of just how we can reframe some things. Those 5 things are maybe some areas that we can improve on, and it'll make our lives easier too, so we're not killing ourselves.
In the long run, yes. And we're not asking people to make massive changes in a day. Pick 1 or 2 things and focus on that, right? No. Again, I think what makes a really good parent is a willingness to self-reflect and say, I could have handled that differently. I'm going to handle it a little differently next time. Or this is an area where I can work on, or this is an area where I can set a boundary. So it's having that self-reflection, I think, is really critical. And, allowing yourself the grace to make mistakes as a parent, to look at what happened, talk to someone about how you could do it differently, and then step into that change also.
Love it. Dr. Laura Saunders, we will leave it there. You've told us many times, comparison is the thief of all joy, and allow yourself the grace to make mistakes. So those, we'll leave it there and work on it. Thank you so much, Dr. Saunders from the Institute of Living in Hartford. We appreciate your wisdom as always.
Take care, Kara.
And thanks for tuning in, everyone, to Kara's Cures. If you found this useful, we really love it if you support the work. Share it with your friends and loved ones on social media. Have a great day, everyone, and be well.